I'll say a few words in French first. Bonjour à tous et à toutes. C'est un grand plaisir d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui pour ce séminaire du Centre d'études Khmer. Je suis honoré d'en assurer la modération, même si je l'avoue, mon français reste celui d'un enfant de 10 ans qui a quitté Meudon en octobre 1985. Alors, pour le bien du public, je vais poursuivre en anglais. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. My name is Dr. Sopal Ear, and I serve on the board of the Center for Khmer Studies. I'm also an associate professor at the Thunderbird School of Global Management at Arizona State University. It's a true pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar, Relational and Organizational Dynamics of Highly Vulnerable Families with Children Experiencing Psychological Difficulties in Exploratory Studies. We're honored to have as our speaker, Dr. Alicia Landbeck, a senior research fellow at the Center for Khmer Studies and a clinical psychologist whose work blends deep compassion with careful scientific inquiry. She holds a doctorate in clinical psychology and psychopathology and serves as an associate researcher at both the Cy Drepe Laboratory at the University of Burgundy, Europe, and Research Unit 3188 at Marie and Louis Pasteur University. Her research explores the lived experiences of vulnerable families in Cambodia, families who across generations have carried the psychological weight of loss, hardship, and resilience. Through months of fieldwork, Dr. Landbeck worked closely with mothers, grandmothers, and children, listening to stories of pain and perseverance and examining how culture, faith, and social contexts shape healing. This is, I should note, Dr. Landbeck's first seminar in English, so I want to extend a special word of appreciation for her courage and grace in presenting her work to such a broad audience. As someone whose own life was shaped by survival and displacement, I know that language itself can feel like another border to cross. I fled Cambodia as a baby during the Khmer Rouge period, thanks to my mother's cunning and determination to escape via Vietnam, pretending to be Vietnamese and using the Vietnamese language as our family's passport. Then onwards to France, when my late mother once again brilliantly claimed not to be Vietnamese at all, but Cambodian, which enabled our family to leave communist Vietnam and to obtain asylum in the French Republic. This is all told in a 6-minute TED Talk, if it interests you. All this is to say that the study of trauma, family, and recovery holds a deep personal resonance for me. So I want to say at the outset, thank you, Dr. Landbeck, for choosing to share this work in English. It bridges not just disciplines, but works of experience. Dr. Landbeck will present for about 30 to 40 minutes. I'm encouraging her to go shorter than 40, just so that we can have more of a discussion, both between myself and her and the audience, with audience questions, which, by the way, I encourage you to pose in the chat feature or Q&A feature and so on. And we'll open up the floor for discussion after she's done presenting. Please feel free to post those questions throughout. And while I tried in the past to allow participants to unmute, the technical difficulties have led me to conclude that it's best to just read their questions and see any follow-ups in the chat box. Dr. Landbeck, the screen is yours.
Thank you, and thank you, Professor, for your presentation. And so, as he told you, it would be my first presentation in English. So I hope I will make myself understandable. So my research is about the relational and organizational dynamics of highly vulnerable family with children. And I'm going to start. So to introduce, Cambodia has experienced profound political, social, and institutional upheaval. The successive transformation of the country have deeply affected social organization, family structure, and also mode of symbolic transmission. But today, Cambodia still faces major economic and social difficulties. Nearly 17.8% of the population and almost 50% of children live below the poverty line, and more than 80% of jobs are considered vulnerable. Violence against children also remain whispered with corporal punishments or psychological violence. These data reflect a fragile social and family context in which the daily realities of families unfold and raise questions about the need for social and psychological support. So, after an initial research focused on care program with children victims of abuse, our research question turned to the family environment of these children in distress. Our initial inquiry focused on the idiomatic representation of suffering in children, but as fieldwork progressed, the issue evolved to the question of family dynamics and the child's place within these dynamics. The aim is to better understand how this family in difficulty function and how the child's place is structured within this dynamic in order to rethink support that take into account both context and culture. So I'm going to start with a quick literature review about mental health and family in Cambodia. And about mental health, the access remains limited in Cambodia, especially in rural areas. Care devices are mainly concentrated in Phnom Penh, despite some outreach like TPO or Precariousness in Battambang. Clinically, issues such as addiction and behavioral disorder are prominent. Other disorders are also reported, such as depression or anxiety. Domestic violence is a frequent reason for consultation. Among young people, depressive symptoms and exposure to trauma are high. Awareness campaigns rely on Facebook, local information, and institutional awareness programs. Usually, the main therapeutic approach includes play therapy, CBT, group therapy. However, reports highlight several difficulties in implementing this program. Patients report a lack of consideration for social and environmental context. They face criticism for the limited cultural sensitivity and lack of community integration. Some authors mention the risk of category fallacy and diagnostic error. So adaptation are recommended. Consideration of family and community dimension, home-based intervention, like they are very common in some NGO projects, and a stronger coordination, especially for child support, and the integration of cultural idiom and feedback from local professionals. Indeed, many studies, such as by Hinton, Chim, or Eisenbusch, report specific Khmer idiom of distress, like 𝐀𝐛𝐬𝐭, 𝐀𝐻, 𝐾𝐿, or also the idiomatic term for psychotrauma backsbat. Some ritual, like going to the pagoda prat, the kun konsai sema, aim at protection, purification, and reunification are also described. Among children, the literature also highlights specific symptoms reflecting the environmental view of psychological distress. Anger, irritability, fear, somatic symptoms, learning difficulties, also 𝐀𝐻𝐿, 𝐶hucabal, frequent sleep problem. These different idioms and rituals structure the meaning-making process of difficulties and are embedded within social and family relationships. Supporting families while requiring an understanding of the cultural expression of suffering also demand comprehension of their organization and functioning. However, Khmer family organization has undergone many upheavals. During the Khmer Rouge genocide, a generational reversal occurred. Children were described as pure, in contrast to elder and parental figures who were disqualified. Many parent-child separation, recruitment of child soldiers, and cases of parricide were experienced. Forms of address were also distorted, symbolically reversing roles. This family history varies according to individual trajectory and resilience support. However, studies indicate a high probability of exposure to one or more traumatic events during this period. The experience of traumatic events and the subsequent emergence of parental disorder can hinder parents' psychological availability towards the children and their caregiving abilities. The degree of exposure, vulnerability, and post-conflict living condition influence the psychological impact of this event on the parent's experience. Some research, as the research of Fields and Old in 2011 and 2013, reports that 20% of mothers present probable PTSD, and it's correlated with a parenting style of role reversal that influence the occurrence of anxiety depressive disorder in their daughters. They find a positive relationship between maternal PTSD and role reversal parenting style that can influence the occurrence of depression and anxiety. However, these studies need to be continued as they do not always explore the direct confrontation of children with traumatic events, nor the living context. Beyond their experience of genocide, Khmer families today face social and economic difficulties that also disrupt family structure. Current economic and social vulnerability results in family rearrangements. Departure for work, sometime abroad in Vietnam or Thailand, placement of children with grandparents or community member, and displacement with grandparents or community member, according to Arthur Eisenbruch, expose children to increased risk of abuse and violence. Traditional roles are being tested. Grandparents who should be cared for by their children and devote themselves to merit-making now assume the daily responsibility of grandchildren, often in precarious conditions. They report a daily struggle for food, precarious material conditions, and a heavy educational burden. The unstable economic, social, and political context and the ongoing needs for reconstruction constitute sources of vulnerability with impact on mental health and family organization. Many children remain exposed to abandonment or domestic violence in situations of extreme poverty. Overall, there is a tension between ruptures like separation, loss, precariousness, and attempted support, with varying levels of stability and effectiveness. So I'm going to present my research question. Contemporary Cambodia represents a setting marked by the combination of persistent socioeconomic precariousness and the transgenerational effects left by the Khmer Rouge genocide. In this context, families must constantly reinvent their mode of organization and survival in an environment where institutional resources are limited and cultural and community framework are weakened. Family dynamic occupy a central place in this adaptive strategy, particularly concerning household cohesion and the place of children. So, the general objective of this study is to explore and understand the family dynamics of Cambodian families living in precarious contexts in order to grasp how they influence the place of children and their support. More specifically, the research aimed to describe family organization and functioning in an unstable socioeconomic and cultural context to analyze how children's difficulties are addressed, expressed, or silenced within family discourse to identify the resources and coping strategies mobilized by family and finally to examine the effect of this dynamic on the place of children within the household. So the research question is therefore formulated as follows. How do Cambodian families living in extremely precarious circumstances organize their family dynamics, and how are children's role and difficulties understood? So for that, we made a research. So to answer this question, an exploratory study was conducted with vulnerable Khmer family. The research was carried out in the province of Battambang in collaboration with a local NGO with whom we worked to facilitate access to the research field. Data collection took place over 9 months from September 2024 to the end of June 2025. About our research positioning, the study is based on a qualitative and longitudinal approach, grounded in a constructivist and interpretative stance. This approach is also clinical in the sense of paying attention to the psychic and relational processes emerging within interviews and observation. Inspired by Esther Bick's observation methodology, it integrates the analysis of atmosphere, shared affects, and counter-transference considered as data in their own right. The research also follows an action research logic, co-constructed with local actors and iteratively adjusted through the fieldwork. The researcher positioning constituted a central element on the process. I can speak Khmer, so I had access to the language and exchange with the family, which helped me to reduce the dependence on the interpreter. The interpreter present during the interview played a supportive and co-analytical role. She intervened mainly to clarify cultural idiom, to enrich the interpretation of polysemous terms, and to discuss afterwards the nuance of meaning. So she wasn't really a filter, but more a contribution who strengthened the intercultural depth of the data and enabled linguistic and analytical triangulation. This dual positioning fostered a more systematic approach. Finally, the dual identity of the researcher as both clinician and foreign researcher influenced the data production. This subjectivity was integrated as an interpretative resource in line with intercultural clinical approach, Devreux and Marie-Rose Moreau. On the ethical level, the study respected the principle of non-maleficence and informed consent given orally in Khmer and validated by the local social worker. The clinical stance adopts follow an ethic of care and respect for otherness, with constant attention to the effect of the encounter and to the relational dynamic generated by the research itself. Data were anonymized and processed in accordance with the principle of the Declaration of Helsinki and the recommendation for qualitative research in context of vulnerability. So I'm going to present the population and how also we organized data collection. So family were pre-selected through a purposive sampling based on criteria defined beforehand. The data collection took place in collaboration with a local NGO specialized in psychological support. So we was sharing the inclusion and exclusion criteria to the social worker. So inclusion criteria, socioeconomic insecurity and vulnerability, children in difficulties, and consent to participate in follow-up. Exclusion criteria are no precarious or vulnerable situation or refusal to participate in this study. As I mentioned, the absence of childhood difficulties does not fall within the exclusion criteria due to the risk of lack of diagnosis or identification. So we made a pre-selection, so the NGO made a pre-selection. And after that, we met the social worker and we organized many meetings to discuss about the family in order also to understand how the social worker, what was the representation of the social worker about this family. So we select a new sample and we met some family. So this pre-selection was carried out in advance by the NGO social worker and discussed in meetings to better understand also the representation. Among the 12 families initially proposed, 7 were selected and included after an introductory meeting with the researcher and the presentation of the project. All accepted longitudinal follow-up. So this is our population. So we was able to meet 3 families with most of the time father, mother, and children. Sometimes have also grandmother living or grandfather living nearby. We met also 3 grandmothers who was taking care of child and grandchild or grand-grandchild for one of them, and 1 aunt in charge of 1 children with disability. So about our research design, each family was visited at home about once a month for 9 months. The first meeting were conducted in the presence of an NGO social worker, while subsequent ones were led by the researcher, accompanied by a Khmer interpreter. We had to change interpreter after around 1 month and a half. At the end of the research, participants were informed of the remaining number of the meeting. This final meeting provided an opportunity to review the time spent together and to ask about their experience of the encounter. Feedback on the research setting itself was requested, as well as whether they wished to have access to psychological support. The exchange took the form of semi-structural clinical research interview, supported by a flexible framework addressing representation of the child, family organization, and mobilized resources, while leaving very broad space for free speech and emerging team. Data collected included clinical observation notes written by the researcher, inspired by the Esther Beck method, and draft immediately after each meeting. During interview, the interpreter noted specific terms that have been mentioned and that the researcher did not know. Then the interpreter also wrote observation notes. All these notes were then discussed to avoid forgetting important elements and to compare their understanding of the interview. Through the research, a reflexive journal was kept, documenting subjective impression, counter-transference, and methodological adjustments. It recorded the various questions gradually raised during the interview, as well as the underlying theoretical reflection. The use of a field journal, regular discussion with an interpreter and the local social worker ensured constant vigilance towards the effect of positioning. So, for example, on this book, like I was noting, like if one family was talking about a specific subject, we was able to add in on a team and ask also other family about it. So our data analysis was conducted using an inductive and comparative thematic approach within a constructivist and interpretative stance. So we followed the constant back and forth movements between data, theory, and reflexive dialogue with the interpreter. After a phase of immersion and initial coding, meaning units were grouped into teams, systematically compared across family, and refined iteratively. Regular discussion within the interpreter and the social worker allowed validation of the cultural relevance of the category. The overall process follows the qualitative rigor criteria defined by Lincoln and Guba: credibility, transferability, dependability, and confirmability. So for the moment, we was able to read the corpus and to write annotation on the mod. And after doing this work with all our observation notes, we was trying to define the first term of the first coding of the term. So right now, because we are still working on the analyze, the theme I will present you just after is not they're not the final analyze. Right now, we're still working on that, and we have asked one of our colleagues for double coding, who are still actually in progress. And when all the team grade will be okay, we will rating by NVivo software. So now, time to present you the preliminary results of this research. So first, our initial findings is like in all the meetings, women, mainly mothers and grandmothers, were the main interlocutor. Meeting the family also means engaging with a broad social environment network. I'm very so sorry for the chicken behind me. I hope that doesn't disturb you too much. So meeting the family also means engaging with a broad social and environmental network. The interview setting frequently included the presence of or passing of neighbors and relatives. Also, in this context, the discourse about the child appeared both explicit and implicit. It was not always a central topic of speech, often being inserted within broader concern related to family organization, material constraints, and everyday relationship. So the thematic analysis conducted made it possible to identify several thematic domains that structure the lived experience and family dynamics observed within the 7 families interviewed. This theme emerged from an inductive and comparative process and reflects both the living condition, the representation of care, the generational relationship, and the symbolic framework, within which experience of precariousness and parenthood are described. So 8 themes were identified, each comprising several sub-themes. So if you want to read, and after I will present each theme with some example. Okay, so first one. So in order to stay around 30 minutes, maybe I will not present everything, but feel free after to ask my PowerPoint or to send me email also if you want to know more about one specific theme. So the first one, so I will present you the more stronger one. So the first one is about physical pain and as an expression of distress and psychological discomfort. So this term brings together discourse of physical pain or suffering in relation to the expression of psychological, emotional, or relational suffering. It's also referred to cultural expression of distress defined in the literature or in a metaphorical function of current psychological experience. So you can see the inclusion and exclusion criteria for this term and also some of the sub-themes. But better to share with you some example. So with one of the grandmother, when we got to meet her, she explained, like one of the first meetings, she explained that she have several health problems, rheumatism, diabetes, high cholesterol, stomach, and liver problem. She has trouble breathing, and she have also very strong back pain. So she has difficulty walking and getting up, and sometimes she has no strength. Above all, so she have back pain. And she said when we talk with her, she has back pain for a long time. It started when someone that she know who lived near died during COVID. But after she said, like, it has been there since she was little. And step by step during our meeting, she was able to say she worked a lot. And she worked a lot during during the genocide. And so every time, this pain is like every day and remind her also this period. For the second grandmother, it was the very last meeting. And she also had to face very strong pain every day. Like she had difficulty to walk, and she needed to do massage and to stay, and she needed something, some wood to be able to walk. And she say that now she walk better. She can walk better without her cane. Walk better on her own. But she doesn't dare to completely give up the cane, give up her cane yet. She needs to keep it close by so she can walk properly. With the mother, she explained like her husband has a health problem, but the doctor is too expensive. They cannot go. He drinks herbal tea made from medicinal plants. She prepared it with plants she has grown in her garden. She know about them because she was taught, like she learned from group Khmer. She said that they cannot go to the doctor now because they refuse to mix traditional method with Western medication. So this first time is about how people express their health problem, how it can be connected to also their psychological problem, and also what is they use to cure themselves between going to the doctor and to the hospital, or also using traditional medicine. This one. So the second one is about the psychological impact of experiences of material and financial insecurity. So this time report on the impact of material, social, and economic condition on the psychological well-being of subjects. It refers to an invasion of psychological space centered on current condition, on the need to find solution, as well as fear about the consequences for physical and psychological quality of life, and also the impact on development and relationship. That means in the family who was living in these conditions, the precarious situation, the lack of food or money was taking a huge psychic place, and it made it complicated to establish a relationship with them. So for some example, we arrived in the house with a mother. We asked for news. And so she started by begging, by telling, she started to say like she has nothing left to eat and no milk to feed her children. She have two newborn twins. So she say she is ashamed and feels sorry for her children because she only has milk in one breast. This is because she does not eat enough. She does not eat enough and cannot produce milk. To cook, to make food, she takes whatever rice she is given and boils it. But she doesn't know how to buy powdered milk for her daughter. It costs women real. She can find small carton of milk sometime for people. But then her daughter gets diarrhea. And so all the conversation was continued about the price of 1 kilo of rice, of meat, of borrowed milk. And so it was hard to continue our conversation with her. It was like she was just continue talking about what she was missing food and also the price of basic needs. With the grandmother, as soon as we arrived, grandmother talked about her difficulties. She tells us that she has nothing to eat and nothing to feed the children. The NGO doesn't give her anything, no rice or other ingredients, even though there are currently 10 people in the family, all living in the rented room. In the morning, they make noodle soup for breakfast. She borrows money from her neighbor, and when she is able to get money, she will pay them back. But at the moment, they have nothing. They have nothing to eat. They can't do anything. She can't work because she is disabled, and she also has a disabled son. Sometimes they can buy a whole chicken from a Monreal. She can cook for everyone, but in general, they have nothing. And so same, the conversation still continue about saying that they had nothing and how to find food without any space for express any feeling or to be able to answer a question and to have a real conversation with us. We also find on our thematic analysis the memories of life experience that marked or break or trauma impacting the current situation and perception of oneself and other. So in this thematic, it's memories of the Khmer Rouge genocide among Cambodian grandmother as a frame of reference for making sense to current situation. For example, grandmother was saying like, during Pol Pot, it was very hard. But at the same time, it's harder today for some grandmother, saying like it was harder before or it's harder today. Like, for example, a grandmother was saying like it was very hard because they didn't have anything to eat. But during Pol Pot, it was easier because have nothing to eat. But today, you can walk on the street, you will find food everywhere, but you cannot buy it. It's also memories of family violence, like I didn't put that here, but for a mother, it was a situation with her husband who was who used to use drugs. Or for another mother also, it's the murder of one of her sister. The fourth theme is family and community ties between rupture and search for support, ongoing restructuring, and family organization. So this time is more about like reorganization, what happened right now in the family. And also, what are the solutions they can find on how that impacts the family, like right now. For example, one mother who was struggled, have had some trouble with her husband, and so she decided to pass some time to leave the house without telling anybody and to pass some time with her mother. Also, like it's like a rupture between family member with another grandmother who doesn't hear anything from her daughter who was in Thailand. The theme 5, it's about the relational and symbolic construction of the child between care, projection, and assigned role. So this one explores the space, place, and perception of children within the Khmer family and social system. It lies at the intersection between experience of family precariousness, breakdowns, traumatic experience, and culture. So the subtheme are the importance of care and the parental role of transmission, the child as an emotional resource and figure of reparation, the child expected participation in family dynamic, domestic help and access to resources, perception of and relationship with children colored by past traumatic experience, perception and understanding of the child emotional and behavioral experiences, or the last one, evocation of abandonment or plan to abandon as a survival strategy. So I let you read some of the examples. The next one is more about place and space, spatial and symbolic organization. So this one is more about how the family organize their environment inside the house and also around, like how they organize the living condition day by day. So the house can be signifying as loss and hardship, like when family is being like everything is falling down inside the house, or cohabitation between family, friends, but also spirits. I'm going to share with you one example. So it's about a mother who just got a new house. And she said to us, last time, so she took a nap in the house. She dreamed, and she saw a 𝐀𝐻𝐿𝐿. It's a little girl with a pretty red dress. She's very beautiful with pale skin, white skin. One day she was working, and she said, like one day she was working as a cleaner in another house, And they have a lot of 𝐀𝐬𝐭𝐫𝐚, but they were ugly and hungry and dirty, all black. Here in this house, in this new house, the 𝐀𝐬𝐭𝐫𝐚 is very beautiful. And in her previous house, there were none. So it's an example to show also how the spirits were like, how to say in English? Like now, the house have some spirit protection spirits. So 7, it's ritual and belief as signifier to family and individual issues. So this one is more about how the family use the Buddhist and animist benchmark also to make sense, to create sense. So the concept of karma and reincarnation as basis for making sense of life event and projecting into the future. Expression of a form of cultural disaffiliation, symbolic deprivation resulting from precarious circumstances, and reliance on belief and ritual as support in the face of life events. So, for example, one grandmother who told us like she don't go to the pagoda. She stopped to go. She didn't go. She can do bank scroll for around once a year during Chumban, but nothing else. She said like she don't want to go to the pagoda because she has nothing. She has nothing to offer to the monk to eat. If she goes, people will look at her and say she has nothing, so she can't earn any merits. And for several family, they was saying like the land is rented. So they didn't have Humo Rentevada, and so they cannot also connect with their ancestor. The last one is more about the relational investment with the researcher as support of projection. So expectation of reciprocity, for example, a mother was asking us to go buy some milk for her baby. Or sometime when I asked to participating in the family daily life, they replied because it was cleaning and preparing a new home and I wanted to just pass time. And said, no, I cannot go because I will get dirty and I'm too white and my skin is too fragile. Also, it's about when I was trying to use new words in Khmer or some stuff that I didn't understand, there was explaining and sharing with me also about new words or cultural elements. So after making like the first work about defining the theme, we tried to arrange them in some area. So these thematic domains refer to a set of terms that are interconnected or maintain a dynamic interdependence, each finding extension and resonance in the others. So indeed, certain team influence one another, sometimes in a circular way, such as situation of precariousness and physical pain. The definition of thematic domains therefore attempt to reflect this interconnection. So during the classification into domain, certain subthemes were reclassified in order to better reflect their meaningful function corresponding to the iterative process of qualitative analysis. So we defined just 4. Material, cultural, and symbolic framework and its psychological impact with a theme like ritual and belief as signifier of family and individual issue, place and space as a psychological invasion of experience of material and financial precariousness. So it's more about the current situation, the background. Second one, it's the expression of rupture, past and present traumatic events causing suffering that determines daily life and relationship. So it's traumatic past traumatic events and current rupture or traumatic situations that have an impact on the way the family live and understand also and how they can create and maintain the bond. The third is really about the child. Like how the background and how these difficulties the family have to face and how they can deal with it have an impact on the child. So it's a view and connection to the child at the intersection of family traumatic, social, and cultural dynamic. So that includes the relational and symbolic construction of the child between care, projection, and assigned function. Like invested child because need, like when a grandmother take care of the child and say like, at the same time, the child is a part of her family because she's taking care of them since they was a baby. And so they have to have the name of the grandmother in their ID card. But at the same time, having the name of the grandmother in the ID card will make the grandmother able to receive more money also. So it's every time like on this double side. And the last one is more about meta-reflexive dimension of the research framework, link and position of the researcher. So the preliminary results of this research already highlight the complexity of family and psychic experience in context marked both by material precariousness, the disorganization of symbolic framework, and the continued presence of past and current trauma. Within the family encounter, the narrative are inscribed in a singular historical and cultural framework, whereas the sequel of the Khmer Rouge genocide, marital separation, migration, and successive loss combined with the constraints of daily life. This collective and individual experience create an environment of psychological vulnerability in which family bond, belief system, and symbolic space attempt to reconfigure themselves. So I decided to develop just three points, and will try to go fast. So the first one is about precariousness and loss of contentment. In French, we say like la perte du contenant. It's an analytic concept. So the results highlight how material and economic precariousness pervades the thinking of psychic life and the family encountered. The issue of lack, whether food, financial, or social resources, affects the activity of symbolization and weakens the capacities of representation. This observation is consistent with the work of Clinic of Precariousness developed by Furtos or Claude Revaud-Dallon, which described precariousness not only as socio-economic condition, but as a psychic state, a situation of rupture of internal and external support, where the subjects struggle to maintain continuity in their sense of existence. Precariousness here acts as a breach in the containing framework. An impact is then observed in this framework, where the external container takes the place of an internal one. Caught in the urgency of survival, the subjects thus lose their capacity for representation and elaboration. It is also the link to others that is affected through a disruption of the intersubjective framework, preventing the reliance on sufficiently stable ties to maintain the cohesion of the self and the family self. This point highlights that precariousness, in its psychic effect, constitutes a phenomenon of delinking. It attacks the bonds between the material and the symbolic, between the subject and their environments, between body and thought. Second point is that this situation of precariousness also affects the cultural and symbolic framework of family. The results show that while Buddhist and animist belief remain structuring reference in making sense of difficulties, some families find themselves on the margins or in a withdrawal from this symbolic framework. The absence or cessation of religious and community ritual, for example, no longer going to the pagoda, abandoning offering or ancestor ceremonies, reflect a process of cultural disaffiliation, understood as a rupture with the symbolic system of the culture of belonging. This disengagement is not necessarily conscious or voluntary. It's emerged in a context where material precariousness, psychological exhaustion, and family fragmentation weaken the possibility of maintaining a link with tradition. In the clinic of precariousness, the loss of the symbolic framework corresponds to what Furtos call a collapse of external support, when institution, belief, and community ties disintegrate, the subject faces a void of meaning. Here, family attempt to rebuild support through investments in the neighborhood or through governmental or NGO social structure. Culture, in its ritual dimension, functions as a collective psychic envelope. It offers a subject shared form of symbolization that sustains thought and allows the transformation of affect. Its erosion exposes individual to a desymbolization of social bonds. Emotion finds no mediation, losses cannot be ritualized, and pains remain raw. Cultural disaffiliation thus become both an indicator of psychic and community fragility and a site for symbolic recomposition. And at least but not least, the place of the child. The results highlight the complex and often paradoxical position of the child within the family encountered. Caught at the crossroad of precariousness, trauma, and family recomposition, the child occupies an ambivalent place, both invested and constrained, which reflects the internal tension of the family group. The child becomes a point where economic, emotional, and moral expectation converge, as well as the effect of disorganization within relationships. In several accounts, the child's function goes far beyond that of being a child. They may be perceived as a material support, financial resource, guarantee for a better future, emotional support for parents in distress, like the mother was saying, like she was feeling very bad. And so when she feels bad, she just looks at her baby and she waits that looking at her baby will make her feel better. Also, the grandmother was saying, like she wants a grandson to talk and support her also. Also, or the receptacle of ideals and unprocessed loss transmitted across generations. This plurality of expectation reveals a delegation of psychic and social function onto the child, who become one of the balancing points of the family system, but also a space of tension and projection. Abandonment, or the intention to abandon mentioned by some family, does not stem from disinterest, but from a strategy of psychic and material survival. This paradox illustrates the difficulty of symbolizing separation and differentiating affective dependence from economic necessity. The child becomes a mirror of the fragility of the family bonds, but also a vector of the transmission of these tensions. Through them circulates an elaborate affect, narrative of loss, and expectation of repair. The relationship to the child thus takes place within a saturated intersubjective register where unprocessed parental affects are replayed through injunction, silence, or form of overinvestment. So about the perspective, I'm going to start with the limitation. So like any qualitative research, this study presents certain limitation. First is the small number of family included and the geographical specificity of the field do not really allow generalization of the results. However, the length of the follow-up, the diversity of family configuration, and the depth of observation during 9 months bring a richness of understanding that favors transferability over statistical representativeness. Also, it's still an ongoing research analysis, like we're still working on analysis. The other limitation is the involvement of an NGO that we took care to to add this point on our analyze also for the thematic. And the last one is also the difference in the long range. Like my position as psychologist, clinician, and foreigner may have influence at the production of data and their interaction within the family too. And the translation of the participants' word from Khmer into French always carry at a risk of loss or displacement of meaning. We mitigated the risk by the joint review of the transcript and the systematic discussion of cultural idiom. Okay, so in conclusion, this research highlights several major areas for clinical and cultural understanding of care. So first, the research setting sometimes became an invested place. Like the family really used this meeting also to share about the feeling that they was using the research device as a place to express also themselves and their difficulties. Also, we highlight also a significant evolution of idiom of distress, while traditional idiom like linked to spirit, karma, or spiritual imbalance remain present. They now coexist with a new form of language for distress, drawing on medical or psychological reference like stress, diabetes, rheumatism, appear in the course also. But that tend to reformulate suffering with the vocabulary now shared with new institutional and health sectors, so have like new specific idiom. I think the recognition of new idiom of distress as well as a local form of symbolization thus represent a privileged pathway towards the reinvention of meaning and the reintegration of the subject. Okay, make it quick. Okay, so thank you everybody for your listening, and I hope I made myself understandable.
Absolutely. I will just say thank you, Dr. Landbeck, for that extraordinary and brave presentation. You've taken us into homes that most people never see, homes where daily survival and deep emotional endurance coexist. What you've shown is that the Cambodian family remains the country's most resilient, most burdened, and most under-recognized institution. This was also your first presentation in English, and it's worth saying plainly, you did something very difficult, and you did it beautifully. You spoke with precision, with care, and with humanity. The courage it takes to share this kind of research in a second language and on such sensitive ground should not go unnoticed. What stays with me most from your presentation is how you reveal trauma as lived continuity. You remind us that Cambodia's story of suffering did not end in 1979. It moved into the quiet rhythm of family life. The grandmother's back pain that began when she walked through forced labor fields, the mother's exhaustion as she measures milk prices and debt, the shame of poverty that compounds across generations. The body in your work becomes both witness and archive. It remembers what the country would rather forget. Your discussion of precariousness as both material and psychological condition is also profound. You make clear that poverty is not just a shortage of income. It is the erosion of internal and external support. When families lose their social containers, ritual, community, even the capacity to symbolize suffering, they also lose part of the framework that makes meaning possible. This is what the French clinical tradition calls the clinic of precariousness, and you bring it vividly to life in the Cambodian context. I was struck too by your observation that Buddhism and animist beliefs continue to function as adaptive systems of care, ways for families to make sense of chaos. The grandmother who dreams of a protective spirit in a red dress, and the mother who heals herself with medicinal plants from her own garden and doesn't want to mix it with Western medicine, reminds us that spirituality is not superstition. It is the grammar through which people articulate suffering when clinical language is unavailable. These rituals and beliefs offer a kind of psychic architecture, a scaffolding of hope. And yet you showed, as you showed, even that symbolic world is beginning to fray. Some families have withdrawn from pagodas, ceased offerings, or feel too ashamed to visit monks because they have nothing to give. You describe this as cultural disaffiliation, the weakening of the link between people and their spiritual traditions. That struck me as one of the most tragic findings of your research, that material deprivation can lead to symbolic exile. When people feel unworthy of religion, the loss is not only spiritual, but ontological. It is a loss of belonging itself. What you capture then is a Cambodia in which economic growth and moral fatigue coexist. The country is no longer at war, but the peace is uneven. For some, life today feels harder than before, harder even than during the Khmer Rouge. I never thought I would say it out loud, yet I have heard it from Cambodians again and again. Then under the Khmer Rouge, everyone was poor together. Now inequality has turned poverty into humiliation. The pain is not only physical hunger, it is social comparison, the daily reminder of exclusion in a land of rising glass towers. Your research forces us to confront that paradox. Development without dignity perpetuates trauma. Families are recognizing endlessly mothers leaving for Thailand, grandmothers raising children alone, fathers absent through migration or illness. You show that this reorganization is not chaos, but adaptation. It is how people build continuity in the face of collapse. A grandmother taking in her grandchildren is performing an act of quiet nation building. She is true social safety net. I also want to commend your method. You worked with interpreters and social workers, not through them. You treated translation as collaboration, not as mechanical transfer. That is ethically important, especially in cross-cultural clinical work, meaning was co-constructed and the presence of the interpreter became an analytic asset rather than a distortion. This humility towards your field partners, your willingness to see your own subjectivity as part of the data, which you outlined as one of the possible subjective or weaknesses, reflects the best kind of reflexive scholarship. For me, as someone who lived through Cambodia's darkest period as a child, what you presented tonight resonates on multiple levels. My mother's cunning, pretending to be Vietnamese so that we could escape, then reclaiming our Cambodian identity to reach France, was itself a form of psychological adaptation, not so different from the strategies you describe. But what I want to end with is I want to again thank you, Dr. Landbeck, for your depth of research, for the ethical care you've brought to it, and for the emotional honesty of your presentation. You've helped us see Cambodia not as a country trapped in the past, but as one still negotiating the terms of its survival. Permettez-moi de dire bravo, Dr. Landbeck. Vous avez parlé avec courage, avec cœur et avec une précision remarquable. Ce que vous avez partagé aujourd'hui est bien au-delà d'une recherche universitaire. C'est un témoignage, un acte d'humanité. Merci infiniment pour ce que vous nous avez offert. Now, let me just start with a few of my own questions that I've prepared and then move on to the questions in the Q&A from the audience. So regarding method and voice, could you tell us more about how you worked with interpreters to ensure that families' voices were authentically represented? What surprised you most in how families spoke about their children's difficulties?
To start with how I worked with a translator, I say like I got the chance also to, it wasn't my first time in the field of Cambodia. So I had the chance to learn, but it was a long time ago. So when I arrived working on the NGO and everybody was just speaking in Khmer with me, suppose they suppose like I was still like be able to do it. So it was like I had to adapt like very fast and very strong. So I think working with a translator is not like a literal word-to-word translation, but it's more like a transmission of meaning and speech. Like we say in French, like we use our appareil à penser. Like when we do translate, like you have to think the word and you have to translate it. It's not word and word, but you have to think about it. And so I think that's how we work together. And as I was able to speak Khmer and I still continue to learn, and I learned more, the way I learned it was with the family this year. So it was like I was trying to speak in Khmer every time. And when I didn't make myself understandable, the translator would help me. And so sometimes she was able to understand also what I wanted to say. So working with a translator, I mean, is more about how we create also a bond between us, like un accordage. In French, we say like un accordage with the translator, like we really work together, because she was able sometimes to, oh, she wants to say that. And so I hear in my, yes, it's this, or no, maybe this one. And also, as I was trying to speak in Khmer, I use like, I was repeating what the family say in Khmer. So I was saying like, oh, if I understand clearly, you say this thing, this thing, this thing. And the most important is this one. Is that correct? Did I understand that clearly or not? And that's it. It's something we use also in clinical therapy, like to say again, to say again, to say again. And so that's how I was able to work. And so my translator, I learned a lot. She was noticed some not. And as I told you also, it's like when I was sometime with the family, when I didn't know a word, or sometimes they was teaching me. Also, they was teaching me when I was asking, like, but this one, what is it? I didn't know this spirit, or how did you do it? What are we talking about? And so they were explaining to me, like one of the grandmother was like, okay, for Phom Ben, với đại trẻសំខាន់kia thì mũiยังtreរៀបចំសម្រាប់ទទួលទេវតា. And so explaining. So they teach me also a lot.
That's
And
amazing.
for your question about the child, what surprised me the most, it was at the beginning. I was arriving like to make a research about the idiomatic benchmark for child and asking about the child. And so just like the family just answered like something completely different of my initial idea. So I had to also follow my field, because the family didn't really speak directly about the child. They speak about how the bond and the relationship is sometimes difficult, or they speak like around the child. And they really use also this meeting to speak about their own difficulties. So that's why I needed also to understand more about the general dynamics on the family and child like in the middle of everything of that. I don't know if I was able
No,
to answer with my English.
you were. And you know, what you said reminds me of how translators work with authors in different languages, and how the work that they translate can sometimes put into the new language the ideas even better than the original, because of how much they can play with the meaning and how they understand what was in fact truly meant by the original author. So I know I had other questions, but there's so many questions currently in the Q&A that I want to get to them as right now, in fact. So An Uong has 3 questions, which you are able to open yourself in the Q&A and see. So I'll just collapse them into one set of questions, because this is not the An Uong question and answer session, but others have also questions. So what historical event significantly disrupted family structures in Cambodia, contributing to psychological difficulties in children? Which major challenge affects the effectiveness of support programs for vulnerable families in Cambodia? And what are recommended approaches to improve care for children with psychological difficulties in Cambodia? So I know that's a lot of questions. One
We'll
person.
try to make it.
Yes. Yeah.
About the historical events, yeah, as I told, like when I was talking about the literature review, yes, sure, of course, we have the genocide, Khmer Rouge genocide, and the years of war also before and after. And now it's more about like just my research just focus on this situation and the consequences, because the grandmother was bringing it. And also the vulnerability and precarious situation, like the parents have to go to work on another place, so they let the children also working with, staying with relative or community member or grandparents. And so that all this situation can have an impact also on the psychological availability also to create bonds and relationship also with children, but have a lot. I think you need just like full literature review about that too in general, not just specifically in Cambodia. And for me, the challenge also, so I will answer like the challenge and how we got the challenge is what I saw is like, for example, on the research, we have a lot of research about depression and anxiety. Yeah, but whereas the idiomatic benchmark about suffering, cultural references, and also maybe have other problem like, so I think the most complicating thing is right now we need to give as a family and the social worker and the local professionals so some more places to make their voice hear, because they also know how to understand all the metaphor and the family situation. So this is my, if I want to answer very, very, very fast, that would be my answer. And the recommended approach improve, like you have a lot of TCC, but some of them, like, as I say also in the beginning of the literature review, is lack of sensitivity, cultural sensitivity. Sometimes some people doesn't really got it. So doesn't make really sense every time. So they need to support the research and training of psychologists and social worker here in Cambodia too, if I want to answer fast.
Absolutely. And obviously the historical event, as you said, that comes to mind, first of all, is something that happened between 1975 and 1979. Now, the next question is, well, let's see, there's two questions from the same individual, Pravitasari. Can you explain more about how do you assess socioeconomic insecurity and vulnerability? Children in difficulty? Was it a subjective assessment or do you use another measurement? And from the same individual, could you share your experience collecting consent from these vulnerable families? How did you communicate and what information did the research team give to them before and after collecting data?
Yeah, okay. So yes, and it's about this question is really about the positioning also of the researcher on the field. So about assess economic insecurity and vulnerability for children in difficulty, I was working with an NGO who work with families. So it was from the NGO. So they have their own assessments based on family member, number of family member, the income and living situation, like if they have the field or not a field, like it's a subject here in Cambodia, or if they rent a house, who have a job or not a work, so the income regarding also to all the family member who was living together, and also how we take meetings with the social worker, like, okay, so why for us, in your point of view, why are you saying that this children is feeling bad or this family have trouble? Because we struggle to work with them. We've been working with them since many years, but the situation doesn't change. So it was both like assessments from the NGO with their own way to do the assessments, and meeting also with the social worker to get also their point of view. And so after I went to meet the family directly on the field also, and ask them if they wanted to, if they was agreed. So collecting consent, it was oral consent. Usually when I go on this kind of field, I don't record anything. I don't really take notes except for word. And we say like, oh, my translator will take some note of the word because I don't know them. And I think I need to understand them and to learn them in order to be able to fully understand you. So that's why I say, because it's a vulnerable family. So nothing like I just go with myself and my translator, we're together, no recording, no anything. Also for this family, signing the fact to sign the paper is something very official that can make them afraid. So we didn't use that too. So I was working there as a research action also. So I came also with all my psychological training, like as I'm a psychologist, so I came also with this position, like to be every time aware of if the family needed like a support or something, I needed to react also as psychologist, like to be here to listen to them also. So it was my position. That's why I say like really inspired of action research. So oral consent, so we came and I really explained like I'm a researcher, I'm a psychologist, I work in science, and I was working before with children who have difficulties. But for me now it's important, if we want to help, we have to understand also the family. So I really explained very, very clearly, but it wasn't very clear every time for the family. So sometimes they was asking also, but why did you come? Okay, let's go, let's explain it again. And you can choose every time if you want to see me again or not. Can we see each other again or not? Do you want to see me again or not? So they was able to choose. So for two families, sometimes say, no, not now. Okay, so that's okay. And after they was asking again, can we meet her? Yes, sure. So we adapt it like this.
Very good. And obviously, when you mention the use of this NGO, do they have their own human subjects protocol, protection protocol, or are you using your university and research labs protocol?
I had to respect also because I was working with the NGO, and that was really the main difficulties, because you came working with as a researcher, but you have also to follow the rules of the NGO, and sometimes they are on the opposites. Like, for example, the NGO need to take picture of their action. But for me, from my ethical point of view, when we got to meet family and talk about very subjective and personal and intimity, we cannot take any picture. So it was at the beginning, it was like, say, no, I don't really, it's important to don't take picture because we are not on the same position as social worker. It's another thing. And I really need to respect also the ethic and the deontology. So it was sometime at the beginning, especially like how to follow and to make these two rules and to make my place and my position clear about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I guess it's a dilemma, making people sign things, which of course is not what you want to do in Cambodia. If you want to sign things that may die or whatever. I mean, this is all very official sounding, and nobody wants to do that if they can help it. Let's move on to more questions. Christy Sanderson asks, can you explain how the example of physical ailment described by grandmother 2 in theme 1 is linked to psychological distress? So a very precise question that takes us back to a slide you were using earlier. Grandmother 2 in theme 1, her physical ailment, how is it linked to psychological distress?
Physical ailments?
Physical ailment, yeah. And look, if you need more time to think about it, we can.
Yeah. But physical ailments, just I don't know this word.
Oh, maladie physique. You know, it's something that was psychological, but instead had a physical outcome. Let's see if you can.
Okay, so it was for grandmother 2. Like, I'm just checking which one. Grandmother 2 in theme 1. Oh yeah, okay, I can explain. Yeah, this one is really related to also all the relationship we create with her. So at the beginning, she was like, for example, it's just like how also we can give interpretation based on theoretical, clinical theory, psychological theory. So at the beginning, people use a lot of metaphor here in Cambodia. So for example, when we first met her, we didn't meet her in her home or in front of her home, but in her neighbor's house. Because she was saying, we cannot come to my house because of the water. We cannot walk. We cannot cross in. So I was just like playing with this to ask if is it a metaphor or not. So it was like, so the road to go there is hard. Yes. So for myself, I understand as a psychologist, maybe are she saying that to be able to meet her, the road is hard too. So we was talking like this. But when you are in your home, how did you feel inside your home? I feel okay because I don't think about anything. Oh, okay. So we was just talking in order to analyze it. And when the social worker said, "Do you want to see?" I said, "No, I think it's grandmother have to decide when she or if she wants us to come or if she don't want us to come." And so she smiled at me. And so all like this one, it was at the very last meeting, and she was saying how it's hard for her to go to walk, to be able to continue to live, to be in movement also. And so at the very last, we had to say goodbye. And she answered to us like, "Now sometime I can walk by myself, but I still need my support. I still need my support." So it's very symbolic also with this grandmother. A lot of our conversation was around symbolic stuff like this. That's why I coded here on the related also to feeling, how she was able to stand or not regarding to the situation around her. Sometimes she was using, sometimes no.
Wonderful. Well, I mean, I was thinking of how in the U.S., as you're, I'm sure, aware, some refugees would lose the ability to see, even though there was nothing physiologically wrong with their eyesight. The trauma of having survived the Khmer Rouge made them blind, and that was a phenomenon that certainly can't be explained. Doctors would look at the eyes. There's nothing wrong with your eyes, but you can't see anymore. So
Yeah, unable
yeah,
to see anything.
yeah. We have so many more questions all of a sudden, so I'm going to try to ask you, and we're going to try to do a lightning round here. Maradi says, thanks a lot, Dr. Alicia, for your meaningful presentation and preliminary research results. I just wonder if your research also covered vulnerable families that had their social and economic condition improve over time.
Yes.
For
Yes, for
example,
one
because their
family.
positive determination to work harder, to offer minimum education to their children, or not to depend too much on the concept of bad karma of the past life, but believe of good measure in this life.
Yes, with one family during our meeting, one family got her situation improved. But because the child got the first place for the bac, so for the baccalaureate, and so they received a free new house. That is the family I explained, like when she was saying, like in this new house, she saw a very beautiful marine convey. So more the house was built, more she was feeling better, and more very protection spirit was coming back to live, to protect the family also.
Wow. Well, to achieve something like first place in the back is really an incredible feat. And one would hope that that's not the only thing you need to do to get to a better place in today's Cambodia. I mean, you know, this reminds me of Spider-Man in France, the guy who went up saving this family after a fire at their apartment, and then he gets French citizenship afterwards. Well, I don't think you should have to do something like that to get French citizenship.
Yeah.
Anyhow, anonymous attendee says, you said about resilience. In technical psychological term, what does it mean? In your research, what did you find? What does it refer to, resilience?
Yeah, it's a technical psychological term. We say like how you're able to go through traumatic events or difficulties. You have different theory to say that the resilience doesn't really exist. It's just elaboration, psychic elaboration. And some others say some people just doesn't get any trauma impact. So it's like a very, it's a concept we're very discussed now. I use the term of resilience when you have an impact, but you have some support to make yourself able to elaborate the trauma. That's in the sense I gave in my research also. I use this one.
All right, next up, Peter Brightswitch says, how does the trauma faced by families in extreme poverty impact children's access to education? If children are unable to receive education or receive very limited education, how do they go about daily life? Do schools offer any services to help students that deal with trauma?
How does the trauma face? Yes, yes, it's the complexity of the family dynamics, like we're currently also trying to represent on schema or something like this with our thematic. So we're still working on that to try to have something clearer. But yes, that have an impact for some children. How do they go about daily life? Like I can give you some example for example, a family who had to face like past traumatic events, and also a family who had to face drug using every day. And so one of the daughter was saying like she was too afraid to go at school. So when she's at school, she faced like anxiety. She's sick. She's sick, like she threw up and everything. And for the mother, because the mother she was more about on a survival mode, because she have to train newborn also. And she was leaving the house sometime in order to make people react. And so she was leaving, come back leaving, and abandon the child also, but for 2 weeks, 1 week. And so I remember one of the children is saying like, he don't want to go to school anymore. So the mother doesn't say anything for that. So he was there during this meeting. And during the mother saying like, I will leave, I will don't say anybody. When people will go, when they will come back, I will be not here. So I say to the children, so maybe it's hard to go to the school when you don't know if you will come back, your mother will still be here. And so he answered yes. So it's kind of a mix between traumatic past and current events, precarious situation, and the psychic availability also for the parents. So the NGO who work with this kind of family always try to take the children, go to school also. But the most important thing is also they need a secure environment also to be able to go to school. Like if you go to school and when you come back, you don't have your mother anymore, of course you will not go to school. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so I have a lot.
Well, I mean, my thought is that trauma is obviously a huge burden, but the educational system, if it hasn't changed much, is still based on pay to play. And if you don't buy the candy, you don't get the lesson. I mean, that's the excuse. I mean, it's they're not selling the lesson, but they are accepting money for candy that is purchased that is sold by the teacher. All right, Chitlam Ang says, did you compare the growth in terms of education between children who live with their parents and children who live with their grandparents?
No, I didn't make any comparison yet about this question. But I noticed some differences, but we've been working on the analysis since just 3 months, so it took time. So I cannot share something very, very clear about the result. I can just give you first feedback. It's like a grandmother, like they used to grandmother when you're grandmother or grandfather in Cambodia, usually it's your children who take care of you. But now we have a reversed role. So that completely changed also the family dynamic and the interaction between the grandmother and the children. But how really that work? Cannot share like very, very clear results, just can give like feedback point of view, but any clear results yet, because you have for these children also were like the parents are not here, so how the family restructured also, and how does that can impact the link and the bond on the family. But I don't have anything very clear about that yet.
Of course. Well, anyways, there's a Khmer saying that a mom can raise 5 kids, but 5 kids cannot raise a mother, because, of course, they're not going to. It's the mother's burden, unfortunately. All right, so we're already over time, but there are 5 questions that remain, and 4 of them from an anonymous attendee. So one of them is, have you explored resilience among these highly vulnerable families, coping strategies, and or their strengths? And we'll combine that with the other anonymous attendee question of what do you think are positive things and negative things, and what can or should be improved in terms of your findings? And then why do you choose Cambodia to conduct your research? What are your best and worst memory during your research? I mean, this, I know I'm trying to squeeze a lot here. In Cambodia, the family structure, nuclear versus extended household, could be strong, positive, supporting network. What is your insight experience when you observe different types of household structures in your study? Households with versus without grandmother, grandparents. Sounds like the same kind of theme from earlier about education under parents versus education under grandparents.
Yeah.
And then An Uong has another question from earlier. Do you think the systematic trauma will prolong to next generation or keep declining by over time? What are the factors of this prolonging or declining? All right, so I've posed to you all the questions. You don't have to answer all of them, but if you want to just say a few words in closing, and then I'll close us out. I'm sure our hosts here want to get on with their days as well, and you still
Yeah,
have
the answer is more about what I was sharing as a pre-conclusion about like family like the culture, the idiomatic benchmark also in representation can be reinforced also. And so I really think the most important thing right now is to support research and training in psychology also in order to create, to let us being creative about the device we want to make also here in Cambodia. So don't take like just a device imported from other country, but to create also something who is really relevant to the culture and situation for this family. A lot of research are talking about the resilience support for this family. So like in my preliminary results, we can show that access to the culture, like supporting the being able to go to the ceremony, to the pagoda, especially for grandmother. Free talking space also to support and to recognize, taking care of the change of idiomatic benchmark, because now it's not just about the previous idiomatic benchmark, but they can also use a new word like teknumpang, living, and so they use another word who can be connected also to psychological suffering. So I think we need to continue to work on that and to hear also local and professional people, family here in Cambodia, to let them share and create some relevant device to support everything, to support the family. And for the trauma, I really believe like Cambodia is, yes, related. So when we think about Cambodia, yes, have the Khmer Rouge genocide, and it's a very important point of the history of Khmer people. But I really think also we have to think about Cambodia today and on the future, because the country changed a lot and have to think a lot of change with imported norm and references also, and how people deal with it. Like for the cures, and when they got to the hospital and they started to use new words came from medical staff to express also the suffering. So we have to think also with Cambodia today and the years today too.
Wow. Well, thank you. Thank you for persisting with all the questions. I know Chitlum has another one, but we'll close it out here, unfortunately, because we do have to end this seminar. Thank you, Dr. Landbeck, for a deeply moving and insightful presentation. You've given us not just findings, but a portrait of Cambodian life lived in the long shadow of history, where trauma and resilience coexist within the same families, and where the struggle to survive has become a quite act of meaning-making. Your research shows that suffering in Cambodia today is not confined to the past. It lives in the daily rhythms of family life, in that grandmother's pain, the mother's worry, the child's sense of duty beyond her years. Yet within these stories, there is strength, the endurance of belief, the creativity of adaptation, and the dignity of those who continue to care for one another when the world fails them. You remind us that development without dignity perpetuates trauma, and that listening, truly listening, is itself an ethical act. For me, as someone who fled Cambodia as a child, your work resonates deeply. It honors those who survived by reinventing themselves and those who still do. On behalf of the Center for Khmer Studies, I want to thank you again for your courage, your compassion, and your clarity. And to all who joined us, thank you for your engagement and thoughtful questions. I'm sorry that not all questions could be answered. We closed this seminar reminded that the work of healing is slow, generational, and unfinished, but also that it continues through scholarship like yours, Dr. Landbeck, and through conversations like this. Thank you all, and good day or good evening wherever you are.